You alone, 70,000 feet above the earth, strapped into a machine that shouldn't fly. Your breath hisses inside the helmet, each inhale echoing the finality of your isolation. Below you, the Soviet Union, endless, hostile, waiting. The CIA promised you this plane was untouchable, that the very stratosphere was your shield. But you don't see safety. You see a hunting ground. Before we dive into this chilling narrative, a true story of failure, betrayal, and technological espionage, do us one favor. If you're hooked by these real-life spy thrillers, hit subscribe to Spy Tech Files. We unlock the secrets the world was never meant to hear. Drop a like if you're already in deep, and tell us in the comments, what's the most audacious spy technology you've ever heard of? Welcome to Spy Tech Files. Tonight, we travel back to the moment one pilot, one plane, and one catastrophic failure nearly triggered a global crisis. The year is 1955. The Cold War isn't just a contest of weapons, it's a contest of fear. Both the United States and the Soviet Union possess nuclear fire, but the deadliest weapon is the unknown. Generals in Washington whisper of a bomber gap, a missile gap. They desperately need to know the truth. But the Iron Curtain is too thick, and Soviet counterintelligence is too ruthless. So, the CIA looked not to the ground, but to the sky. This is where Lockheed Skunkworks changed the game forever. Hidden in a California desert hangar, a team of engineers birthed a secret machine, the U-2 spy plane. It could climb to 70,000 feet higher than any fighter, higher than any missile. From that thin, blue vantage point, its high-resolution cameras could read the shadow of a missile silo from 12 miles above. The U-2 wasn't just an airplane. It was the ultimate strategic gamble for survival. When the first missions began, they felt like miracles. The U-2 sailed over Soviet bomber bases, nuclear test sites, and missile factories. The photographs were chilling, but they brought crucial clarity. The Soviets were dangerous, but they were not ahead. For a moment, Washington breathed easier. Every successful flight was a technological and intelligence triumph. But for Moscow, every flight was a profound humiliation. Soviet radar tracked the intruder relentlessly. Fighter jets scrambled, pilots clawing at the sky, engines screaming, only to stall long before reaching the U-2 seconds altitude. The Kremlin was furious. In the Kremlin, Nikita Khrushchev raged. Generals swore they would bring the ghost down no matter the cost. Scientists were ordered to create a new weapon. The result? The S-75 Dvina, a surface-to-air missile designed to pierce the very high altitudes the U-2 relied on. The CIA didn't know it yet, but every successful flight was bringing them closer to disaster. This is the central theme of our declassified history, the relentless technological arms race driven by intelligence needs. Think about the sheer innovation demanded by Cold War espionage. The U-2 was a delicate masterpiece, a high-altitude platform built around a camera. But what about the tools the agents on the ground used? We're talking about sub-miniature cameras, like the Minox, small enough to fit in a cigarette pack. We must also remember the encrypted communication devices built into shoe heels, and the microdot's entire pages of intelligence shrunk down to the size of a period, hidden in the binding of a book. Every scrap of technology was an essential file in this game of global chess. And now, we step into the cockpit, into the life of Francis Gary Powers. Powers wasn't James Bond. He was the son of a Virginia coal miner, a gifted pilot recruited into a program so secret it didn't officially exist. His instructions were brutal and explicit. If you're caught, you don't exist. If you die in silence. Imagine hearing that before every mission over hostile territory. The tension of the Cold War peaked in 1960. President Eisenhower was preparing for a historic summit with Khrushchev in Paris, a flicker of hope for diplomacy. But the CIA wanted one more mission. A final triumphant strike. Straight across the Soviet heartland, from Pakistan to Norway. The date? May 1st, 1960. Soviet May Day. A day of parades, pride, and military spectacle. A calculated insult aimed at Soviet pride. Powers climbs into his silver pressure suit. The canopy seals with a hiss. He is completely alone. At 70,000 feet, the world is silent. He is above the weather, above the clouds, above everything human. But he knows what's below. Radar stations, fighter bases, and missile sites are all tracking him. In Moscow, Khrushchev smiles for the cameras at the May Day parade. But beneath the spectacle, reports filter in. The American is flying again. Another U-2, this time on their most sacred holiday. In a radar bunker near Sverdlovsk, operators watch the single blip crawl across their screens. For years, they watched this ghost escape their grasp. But today, they have the weapon to strike back. A voice crackles clearly in Russian. Target acquired. And with those two words, the trap closes fast. Powers sees nothing at first, just the silent thrum of the engine. Then, a sudden flash, a burst of white smoke cutting through the stratosphere. A missile. Then, another. 3 S-75 Dvina missiles streak towards him, closing fast. The shockwave slams into the plane. Metal groans violently. Alarms shriek. The U-2 shudders, tearing itself apart. The untouchable aircraft begins its violent, catastrophic fall. Powers wrestles with the controls, but the fragile bird is already dying beneath his hands. He finally manages to eject, tumbling, spinning violently, until his parachute snaps open, saving his life at the last second. He lands in a Soviet field, his silver suit making him a living trophy for the soldiers who find him. The CIA's cover story that a NASA weather plane was lost shattered the moment Khrushchev revealed his declassified history coup. He taunted them by announcing, "We have the pilot, alive." The U-2 disaster was more than a failed mission. It was a global crisis. The Paris summit collapsed. Eisenhower was publicly exposed as a liar. The Cold War grew colder still. Powers was eventually exchanged for the Soviet master spy, Rudolf Abel, on the Glienicke Bridge, the famous Bridge of Spies. This marked the beginning of a cynical, but necessary, tradition of spy swapping. But here is the final, profound lesson from this declassified history, a lesson that echoes across the decades, right into our modern digital era. The greatest consequence of the U-2 incident was the realization that invisibility is a temporary luxury. The US pivoted hard to spy satellites machines whose pilots could not be interrogated. The human risk was essentially eliminated. This failure of analog espionage gave ultimate birth to the age of digital intelligence. Today, we face a new type of threat, and it's directly relevant to the technological history we just explored. Cybercrime and digital age crime. In the Cold War, the enemy's radar was fixed on the U-2's physical silhouette. Today, the threat targets our digital silhouette, our data, our networks, and our finances. The lessons from Francis Gary Powers' ordeal are, shockingly, the best tools for modern cyber defense. First, the U-2 lesson. Assume nothing is untouchable. Powers trusted his altitude. Today, many trust their basic firewall. We must adopt a zero-trust security model, verify everything, assume all networks are potentially compromised. Second, the Abel lesson. The human is the weakest link. Powers was betrayed by his own survival. Today, over 90% of cyber attacks begin with phishing tricking the human user. The best defense is constant training, teaching yourself and your teams to spot the digital spy trying to trick you into clicking a malicious link. Never let your guard down. Third, the S-75 lesson. Technology always evolves. The Soviets developed a countermeasure, S-75, that made the U-2 obsolete. Cybercriminals are constantly developing new exploits and malware as well. As an organization or individual, you must prioritize patch management, software updates, and endpoint detection. You must always be looking for the next S-75 the criminals are building to pierce your defenses. The U-2 disaster taught the world that there is always a cost to secrecy. Powers survived, and in doing so, he showed us that the spy is fragile, fallible, and mortal. In our digital age, the failure of a mission can mean the collapse of a bank or the theft of an identity. We must learn from this declassified history of technology and espionage to build the robust digital defenses we need to survive. File closed. But the mission continues.